He pretended to forget his black card to test her. Her calm refusal made the billionaire rethink himself. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Jack Anderson was no stranger to power. A self-made billionaire. He had risen to the top through sheer intellect and an unyielding will to win. His business empire spanned across technology, real estate, and luxury services, and he had earned a reputation for being both ruthless and calculating. In Jack's world, everything could be bought, except, of course, respect. That was something people had to earn, and Jack liked testing the limits of those around him. It was a Thursday evening when Jack found himself at the finest restaurant in Manhattan, La Belle Époque, waiting for his dinner. His table was near the window, overlooking the bustling streets of the city. As usual, Jack was in a suit that cost more than most people's annual salaries, his hair meticulously styled, and his posture perfect. But something about this night felt different. He had asked to be seated at a table far from the main action, preferring solitude for his meal. Yet, as he waited, he found himself growing restless. He glanced at his phone again, checking the time, his patience wearing thin. The restaurant was known for its impeccable service, but he had been waiting for over 10 minutes now, and the usual efficiency seemed lacking. Just as his irritation was beginning to peak, a waitress approached his table. She was young, with shoulder-length brown hair neatly pulled back into a ponytail. Her uniform was impeccable, and her movements were quick yet graceful. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, Jack saw something in them, something beyond the usual polite mask that most waitstaff wore. She set down a glass of sparkling water and smiled. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson. I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, her voice calm and steady. Jack raised an eyebrow. He had expected a timid, perhaps nervous woman, someone who would fawn over him. Instead, this waitress exuded a quiet confidence that caught him off guard. He glanced at her name tag, Christina Matthews. "I'm waiting for a guest," Jack replied curtly, his attention already returning to his phone. He dismissed her with a slight wave of his hand. Christina nodded without a flicker of surprise, turning to leave. But just as she reached the edge of his table, Jack called out, "Actually, could you help me with something?" Christina paused and turned back to face him. Her expression remained neutral, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. What can I assist you with?" Jack studied her for a moment, an idea forming in his mind. He was known for testing people, especially those who served him. It amused him to see how far he could push them before they cracked. "I seem to have forgotten my black card," he said, smirking slightly. "Do you think you could handle a dinner without it?" Christina met his gaze, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Jack thought he saw a flicker of hesitation, but it was gone almost instantly. She simply nodded and took a step closer. "If you don't mind, Mr. Anderson, I'll just need to confirm that you're good for the payment." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" Christina didn't flinch. "I need to know how we'll handle the bill, given that you've forgotten your card. If you don't mind, I'll need an alternative method of payment." Jack was momentarily taken aback. He had expected her to panic or to be flustered. But here she was, speaking to him calmly, as if he was just another customer. It wasn't the response he was used to. "And what would you suggest, Christina?" he asked, now genuinely intrigued. Without missing a beat, she replied, "We could either wait until you're able to make the payment, or perhaps we could settle it another way." Jack smiled. This was getting interesting. "Another way?" he echoed. "What do you have in mind?" Christina's gaze softened slightly, but she didn't waver. "I suggest we simply go ahead with the meal. If you want to prove yourself worthy of the bill, you're welcome to return at your convenience." Jack was stunned. It wasn't a challenge he had expected. Most people would have folded under the pressure, but not Christina. She stood there, calm and poised, as if she had just handed him a lesson in humility. Something shifted in Jack. The arrogance that had fueled him for years felt momentarily irrelevant. He watched her walk away, her figure blending into the rhythm of the busy restaurant. As the night went on, Jack found himself thinking about her. There was something about her response that left him speechless, a calm defiance he had never encountered before. I. Christina walked back to her station, her mind briefly wandering as she adjusted to the usual rhythm of the restaurant. The dining room hummed with the chatter of Manhattan's elite, and the delicate clink of silverware echoed in the background. Despite the bustling environment, her thoughts kept drifting back to the exchange with Jack Anderson. There was something unsettling about him, something beyond the usual arrogance that wealthy patrons often displayed. His calmness in the face of her refusal was unexpected, and his challenge had caught her off guard in a way she hadn't anticipated. As she continued with her duties, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had crossed paths with someone who wasn't easily swayed by the superficial barriers that separated the powerful from those who served them. Jack, for his part, found his thoughts wandering back to Christina as well. As he sat at the table, waiting for his meal to arrive, he found it increasingly difficult to focus on the contracts he had been reviewing. He had seen many people in his life, businessmen, investors, CEOs, but none like Christina. Most people who served him treated it like just a job, but Christina had a certain poise, a calmness that defied the usual response he got from others in her position. She didn't cower under his gaze, nor did she try to please him in the way most did when they were in his presence. Her refusal had been a lesson, though subtle, in how to approach power. It wasn't just the fact that she had stayed calm. It was that she had made him question himself. He had always assumed his wealth and status would command respect, but Christina had shown him that it wasn't about money. It was about how one carried themselves. It was about integrity and self-respect. When his meal finally arrived, Jack took the time to study his surroundings. He had been coming to this restaurant for years, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the lingering feeling that he had underestimated someone. Maybe it was the strange feeling of respect that was slowly growing in him for a person he had originally dismissed as just another waitress. As he ate, his mind wandered back to her calm, assured response. There was more to her than met the eye. But what? He found himself asking questions he hadn't asked about anyone in years. As the evening wore on, Jack noticed Christina moving effortlessly through the restaurant. Her movements were smooth, graceful, but it wasn't just that. There was something in the way she interacted with the other staff, with the guests. It was clear she wasn't just performing a job. She was part of something larger. Jack didn't know why, but he felt a sudden urge to learn more about her. Maybe it was the challenge she presented, or maybe it was the fact that, for once, someone had made him feel small. It wasn't a feeling he was accustomed to. The night went on, and soon it was time for Christina to bring him the bill. As she placed it on the table, their eyes met briefly. For a split second, Jack thought he saw a flicker of something else, something other than the professionalism she had shown all evening. Maybe it was a hint of curiosity, or maybe it was just the way she stood there, unwavering in front of him. She didn't offer a smile or a polite remark. She simply placed the bill down, met his gaze, and turned to walk away. Jack's hand instinctively reached for the bill, but as his fingers brushed the paper, he found himself hesitating. What was he doing? His eyes followed her as she moved back to her station, disappearing into the hustle and bustle of the restaurant. The truth was, Jack didn't know why he was still thinking about her. After all, she was just a waitress, right? But there was something about the way she had handled the situation, her quiet strength, that stuck with him. Something was different. And as he finished his meal and prepared to leave, Jack made a decision. He needed to know more about Christina Matthews. Not just about her job, but about who she really was. It was a thought that had never crossed his mind before about anyone in her position. But Christina wasn't like the others. There was a story behind those calm eyes, and Jack Anderson was determined to find it. The next day, Jack sat in his office, the glass walls of his penthouse offering a stunning view of the city. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important. Something about Christina had stayed with him all night. He had done his research. Christina Matthews, 25 years old, worked at La Belle Époque as a waitress. She had a degree in finance, a background that seemed at odds with her current position. Jack found the discrepancies intriguing. It didn't make sense. Why was someone with her qualifications working as a waitress? What was she hiding? His curiosity grew with each passing minute. Jack wasn't used to feeling like this. Usually, he was the one in control. He was the one who made the decisions. But this time, something was different. He needed to know more. And for the first time in years, Jack realized he wanted to get to the bottom of a mystery that wasn't about money or business. It was about someone who had made him see things in a new light. Jack sat in his penthouse office, his mind racing with the research he had just conducted. Christina Matthews, 25 years old, an Ivy League graduate, and yet working as a waitress. The more he read, the more intrigued he became. How could someone so well-educated, so clearly capable, end up in such a position? Something didn't add up, and Jack was determined to find out what it was. He leaned back in his chair, staring out over the city, but it was no longer the skyline that held his attention. His thoughts were consumed with Christina and the mystery surrounding her. It had been 2 days since their encounter at the restaurant, and Jack had not been able to shake the memory of their interaction. Her calm demeanor had thrown him off balance, something that was rare for him. He had expected her to cower, to apologize, but she hadn't. Instead, she had stood her ground, and that had left him unsettled. This wasn't just about a test anymore. He needed answers. Jack glanced at the clock on his desk. It was just past noon. He had already scheduled the meeting he needed to attend later in the afternoon, but something inside him urged him to act now. Without hesitation, he dialed the number on the business card Christina had left him. The phone rang twice before a soft voice answered. "Hello, this is Christina." Jack took a deep breath, surprised by how nervous he felt. "Christina, it's Jack Anderson." There was a brief pause, followed by a soft, controlled response. "Mr. Anderson, how can I help you?" Jack felt an unusual wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had reached out to hundreds of people over the years, but somehow, this felt different. "I wanted to speak with you. In person." Christina was quiet for a moment. "I'm not sure what you want to discuss, but I'm available tomorrow afternoon after my shift." "I'll meet you then," Jack replied, already pulling out his calendar. They agreed on a time and location. As he ended the call, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. It was strange how a brief encounter with a waitress had thrown him into such a whirlwind. He had spent years building his empire, conquering industries, and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Yet, in a moment, Christina Matthews had made him rethink everything. The next day, Jack arrived at the small coffee shop near the restaurant where Christina worked. He was early, and as he sat at a table, he couldn't help but notice how different this felt. The sleek, polished interiors of his office were a world away from the cozy, unpretentious ambience of the cafe. It felt foreign to him, but there was something oddly refreshing about it. Jack checked the time on his watch. It was almost 2 o'clock. He had already ordered a coffee, but it was cold by the time Christina walked in. She wore casual clothes, jeans, and a simple shirt, and her appearance was a far cry from the polished look he had seen in the restaurant. As she approached his table, Jack couldn't help but notice how effortlessly confident she looked. It was the same confidence he had seen in her the other night, but now, it was clearer. "Mr. Anderson," she greeted him with a smile, though it was far less formal than before. "Christina," Jack said, standing up to greet her. "Thanks for meeting me." She nodded but didn't sit down right away. "I'm not sure what this is about, but I'm curious." Jack gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit down. I want to explain." Christina hesitated but took a seat. Jack leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't know how to explain this, but I feel like I owe you an apology," he started. "I tested you the other night, and I didn't give you the respect you deserve." Christina raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this. "I wasn't offended," she said, "but it wasn't your test that bothered me. It was the way you assumed everything could be solved with money." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I know. It's how I've lived my entire life. Money has always been the answer for me. But you showed me that there's more to life than that." Christina's expression softened, but she didn't say anything right away. "I've spent years building my business, my wealth, and I've never questioned it. But now I find myself questioning everything," Jack admitted. "I'm not asking for your approval, but I want to know why you decided to stay in that job, despite everything you could have done." Christina smiled, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was calm, understanding. "I'm not hiding anything, Mr. Anderson," she said quietly. "I've worked in finance. I could have stayed in that world, but I didn't. Life isn't just about climbing the ladder. Sometimes, it's about finding meaning in what you do every day." Jack studied her, his mind racing. "You're telling me that you walked away from a career in finance to work as a waitress because it gives you meaning?" Christina nodded. "Yes. It's about the people I meet, the stories they share, and the connection I have with them. It's not about the money, Jack. Her words hit him harder than he expected. I've been so focused on what I can buy and control that I've missed the point of it all. For the first time in years, Jack felt vulnerable. Not in a way that made him weak, but in a way that made him realize how much he had to learn. They sat in silence for a few moments before Jack spoke again. I need to understand more. I want to know how you see the world. Christina leaned back in her chair, studying him for a moment. You'll have to be willing to listen, she said, her voice gentle, but firm. Jack smiled, a real smile, one he hadn't shown in a long time. I'm ready to listen. Jack sat across from Christina, the small cafe table between them now feeling like a barrier he was eager to cross. He had expected to spend this meeting trying to explain himself, maybe convince her that his usual way of doing things was valid. Instead, he found himself listening. Really listening. Her words weren't just about what she had chosen to do, but about a worldview that had never quite occurred to him. She wasn't saying anything radical or extreme. She was just speaking from a place of understanding. For someone who had spent so long in the cutthroat world of business, where every decision was weighed against a bottom line, Christina's calm perspective felt foreign. But it was also refreshing. The weight of his own success, the money, the deals, the years of building his empire, had never felt like more of a burden than it did now. Jack had always been driven, but for the first time, he wondered if his relentless pursuit of more had come at the cost of something far more important. As they talked, the afternoon sun filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. It wasn't just the coffee that warmed him now, it was the conversation. Christina, for her part, seemed to be as at ease with their new dynamic as she had been with their first encounter. There was no awkwardness, no judgment in her tone. She just spoke the truth, her voice steady and composed, as if she was used to being heard. Jack found himself opening up more than he had in years. You're right, he said after a pause, his voice quieter than usual. I've been so focused on accumulating wealth, on building something grand, that I didn't stop to think about why I was doing it in the first place. I've always thought that power and money were the keys to everything. Christina smiled, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a soft, understanding smile that conveyed a sense of patience. It's not about the power, Jack. It's about what you do with it. Jack's gaze lingered on her face, and for the first time, he realized how much he had underestimated her. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who understood the deeper currents of life. Her words carried weight, not because she was wealthy or powerful, but because they were rooted in experience. I've made a lot of mistakes, he continued, his words coming easier now. And I've hurt people along the way. I've done things I'm not proud of, all in the name of success. Christina nodded, but she didn't offer any judgment. I think everyone has regrets. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them. About figuring out what really matters. Jack leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning with thoughts he hadn't allowed himself to entertain before. He had spent so much time chasing success that he had never stopped to ask himself what success truly meant. I think I've been chasing the wrong things, Jack admitted, his voice thick with realization. I thought that if I had enough money, enough power, I could fix everything. But it's not about that, is it? Christina's gaze was steady, unwavering. It's not about what you have. It's about who you are and how you treat others. Power doesn't make you a good person, but kindness, humility, those things do. Jack's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he felt truly seen. Not as a billionaire CEO, but as a man who had spent years hiding behind a wall of wealth and status, but who was now beginning to understand the value of real connections. I've been wrong, Jack said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I want to be better. I don't know how yet, but I want to try. Christina smiled again, this time with a warmth that was impossible to ignore. That's the first step, Jack. Acknowledging that you're not perfect. It's about making choices that reflect who you want to be, not who you think you should be. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling between them. Jack felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from making another successful deal or securing another profitable investment. This was different. This peace was about understanding. Understanding that his worth wasn't tied to his financial success, that his actions could have a real impact on those around him. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt a spark of something he had long forgotten. Hope. The hope that, maybe, just maybe, he could change. As they finished their drinks, Jack knew that this was just the beginning. He had a long way to go, but for the first time, he was willing to take the first step. "Thank you," he said as they stood to leave. "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to learn so much in one afternoon." Christina gave him a soft smile, the same smile she had worn during their first encounter. "You're welcome. Sometimes, all it takes is a different perspective." As they said their goodbyes, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. Not for the deals he had closed, not for the money he had earned, but for the moment of clarity that Christina had given him. It was a gift that no amount of wealth could ever buy. Jack's thoughts lingered as he walked back to his penthouse office, the glass walls offering a spectacular view of the Manhattan skyline. The city, bustling and alive, seemed to contrast with the calm clarity he felt inside. Christina's words had echoed in his mind all afternoon. He had always measured his success by the things he owned, the deals he closed, the power he wielded. But now, he realized that those things didn't define him, not in the way he had always believed. Christina had opened his eyes to the deeper meaning behind his choices, or rather, his lack of choices. He had been so focused on achieving more that he had forgotten what truly mattered. But it wasn't too late to change. Jack knew he couldn't just forget about the past. He couldn't undo the decisions he had made or the people he had hurt along the way. But maybe, just maybe, he could start making different choices. The thought was both liberating and terrifying. As he sat down at his desk, Jack opened his laptop. The business world was still calling. There were meetings to attend, investments to make, deals to close. But now, it all seemed a little less important. Maybe he didn't need to be involved in every decision anymore. Maybe he could delegate. The question now was, what did he want to do with his life? He had spent so many years building an empire that had consumed him, and now that empire felt hollow. His mind wandered to Christina. It wasn't just her calm demeanor that had made an impact on him. It was the way she carried herself, her unwavering confidence, her ability to see through the surface and into the heart of things. She didn't chase power or money. She was grounded, focused on what truly mattered, connection, meaning, and the kind of life that wasn't defined by a balance sheet. Jack didn't know how to reach that place, but he knew he wanted to. His phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. It was a message from his assistant, reminding him of a dinner meeting scheduled for later that evening. As he glanced at the clock, Jack realized he had a little time before the meeting. The idea of taking the evening off, of just stepping away from everything, was tempting. But he knew he couldn't avoid reality forever. He had responsibilities, people depending on him. Still, the thought of making a change, even a small one, was a thought that gave him hope. It was at that moment that Jack decided to take the first step. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he had never thought he'd call. The phone rang twice before it was picked up. "Hello." Christina's voice was calm, but there was a hint of surprise in it. "Christina, it's Jack," he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of excitement. "I was hoping we could talk again. In person." There was a brief silence on the other end before she replied. "I'm free tomorrow afternoon," she said, her voice neutral. "That works for me. I'll see you then." Jack hung up the phone, feeling a sense of anticipation building in his chest. This was it. He was taking the first step towards something different. He didn't know what exactly, but he was willing to try. The next afternoon, Jack arrived at a small, unassuming cafe just outside of the city. It wasn't the kind of place he usually frequented, but that was part of the appeal. It felt authentic, real, and the kind of place where a conversation could happen without distractions. As he sat down at a corner table, Jack glanced around, his mind still racing with thoughts of the future. Would Christina even want to help him? He had so much to learn, and he wasn't sure if she would be willing to invest time in someone who had spent so long chasing after the wrong things. His doubts were quickly silenced when she walked in. Christina was dressed casually, as usual, but there was something about her presence that commanded attention. She had a way of moving through the world that was effortless, as if she knew exactly who she was. As she approached the table, Jack stood up to greet her, his heart beating faster than he expected. "Christina, thanks for meeting me again," Jack said, his voice sincere. She smiled and nodded, taking a seat across from him. "Of course. What's on your mind, Jack?" He took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, and I think I've been going about everything all wrong. I've spent so much time focusing on success that I forgot what success actually means. I don't want to be the person I've been anymore. Christina studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. What do you mean by that? She asked softly. Jack looked at her, his gaze steady. I want to change, Christina. I want to live a life that's not about the money or the power or the empire. I want to live a life that has meaning, and I need help to figure out how to get there. Christina didn't say anything right away. Instead, she simply nodded, as if taking in his words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. It's not easy to change, Jack. It's going to take time, and it's going to require a lot of hard work. But you've already taken the most important step. You've acknowledged that you want to change. Jack felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. I don't know where this will take me, he said quietly, but I'm ready to find out. Christina smiled. That's the spirit. And I'm here to help, but you have to do the work. I can't do it for you. Jack nodded, a sense of determination building inside him. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt hopeful. He was ready to take the journey, no matter where it led. As they talked for the rest of the afternoon, Jack realized something. This wasn't just about changing his career or his wealth. It was about changing himself, learning what truly mattered, and finding a path that brought him peace, not just success. As the weeks passed, Jack felt himself gradually shedding the layers of his former life. He had made a promise to himself to change. The days of chasing power and wealth above all else were behind him. With Christina's guidance, he began to redefine his values, to understand what it truly meant to live with purpose. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always comfortable. He faced moments of doubt and frustration, but he kept pushing forward. Each small step he took felt like a victory. His business empire was still there, still thriving, but it no longer consumed him. He delegated more and trusted others to handle the decisions he once controlled with an iron fist. His evenings, once filled with endless meetings and negotiations, were now spent in quiet reflection. Sometimes he found himself sitting in silence, contemplating the life he had built and the one he was beginning to create. Christina had been a steady presence in his journey, offering insight and encouragement whenever he needed it. Their meetings became a regular part of his schedule, and with each conversation, Jack felt himself unraveling the layers of his old self, revealing the person he had always wanted to be. One afternoon, as Jack walked into a small art gallery on the outskirts of the city, another place Christina had suggested he visit, he found himself facing a work of art that took his breath away. It wasn't a painting of a city skyline or a luxurious mansion. It was a simple landscape, depicting a small cottage nestled in the woods, with a soft stream running nearby. There was nothing grand about it, but there was something about the piece that spoke to him. He stood there for what felt like hours, absorbing the calm and simplicity of the scene, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It reminded him of something he had long since forgotten, the beauty of quiet moments, the power of stillness. For so long, he had been focused on the next big deal, the next acquisition, the next success. But in that moment, he realized that he had been missing something more profound all along. He took a deep breath, his chest swelling with a sense of peace he had never known before. As he walked out of the gallery, he felt lighter. His mind wasn't racing with thoughts of the next step in his business or the next deal to close. Instead, it was at peace, content in the present moment. Christina had been right. There was more to life than power and success. It was about finding balance, about nurturing relationships, and about understanding that happiness wasn't something you could buy. Jack's newfound clarity became the foundation for the changes he made in his life. He reached out to people he had neglected for years, friends, family, colleagues, and began to rebuild connections that had been lost in the chaos of his pursuit of success. He started volunteering his time for causes that mattered to him, using his resources to make a real difference. As he gave back to the community, Jack realized that the joy he felt from helping others was far more fulfilling than the satisfaction he got from closing a lucrative deal. His work still mattered to him, but now it was secondary to the more important aspects of his life, his personal growth, his relationships, and his sense of purpose. He began to feel like a different person, someone who wasn't defined by his bank balance or his business deals. He was defined by his actions, his character, and his willingness to make a difference. One evening, as Jack sat on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the sun set over the city, his phone buzzed with a message from Christina. "How are you doing?" it read. Jack smiled as he typed his response. "Better than ever. Thank you for everything." He hit send and sat back in his chair, the soft evening breeze brushing against his face. His journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. But for the first time in years, Jack felt truly at peace with himself. He was on the right path. And as he looked out over the city, he knew that no matter what the future held, he would face it with a new sense of purpose, a new perspective, and the courage to live life on his own terms. As the days turned into weeks, Jack found himself embracing a new way of living. His routine was no longer filled with back-to-back meetings and high-stakes business deals. Instead, he spent more time reflecting on the changes he had made and the changes he still needed to make. The transition was not easy, and there were moments when doubt crept in. But with each step forward, he felt more and more at peace with his decision to live a life of purpose, not just profit. One afternoon, Jack stood in his office overlooking the city, his fingers grazing the edge of his desk. He had spent years building his empire, but now, for the first time, he felt like he was truly in control, not of others, but of himself. He had learned that leadership started within. He glanced at the calendar on his desk. His thoughts turned to Christina, who had been his guide and his mirror. She had shown him a world he had never truly understood, one where the value of kindness, connection, and personal growth far outweighed any financial success. Over the past few months, their conversations had evolved from simple exchanges to deep discussions about life, purpose, and values. Christina had never asked for anything in return, but Jack had started to feel that he needed to do more, not just for himself, but for the world around him. He had recently met with several organizations that focused on social causes, education, homelessness, and sustainability. He had begun donating not just money, but his time and expertise, working on initiatives that aimed to make a tangible impact. His newfound sense of purpose had become a guiding force in his life. But it wasn't just about charity. It was about creating a legacy that truly mattered. One evening, as Jack prepared for a meeting with one of his business partners, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Christina. "I've been thinking about you. How are you really doing?" The message was simple, but it made Jack pause. How was he doing, really? He had made so many changes, and yet, there was still something that felt incomplete. He realized that, while he had been outwardly successful in shifting his life, there were still pieces of his past self he hadn't fully let go of. The urge to prove himself, the need to be constantly on top, the habit of defining success through external achievements, these things still lingered. Jack set his phone down and took a deep breath. He needed to confront those lingering feelings. It was time to let go of the remnants of the person he had been and fully embrace who he was becoming. As the days passed, Jack began to spend more time in nature, something he had neglected for years. A quiet hike through the woods, a walk along the beach at sunset. These moments gave him a sense of peace he had never known. They grounded him, reminding him of the bigger picture. He began to realize that life wasn't just about what he could achieve or how much he could accumulate. It was about being present, being true to himself, and creating meaningful connections with the people around him. His partnership with Christina also deepened. What had started as an unlikely friendship had blossomed into something more profound. Jack didn't know where this would lead, but he no longer felt the need to control every aspect of his life. He had learned to trust the process, to surrender to the flow of life rather than trying to force it. One afternoon, they sat together in the same cafe where they had first met. The conversation was easy, comfortable. Christina was sharing a story about a recent volunteer trip she had taken, and Jack found himself captivated by her passion and commitment to helping others. "You know," Jack said thoughtfully, "I've realized something. The real change doesn't come from what we have or how much we can do. It comes from who we choose to be and how we treat the world around us." Christina smiled, her eyes softening. "That's exactly it. We can spend our lives chasing after things, but the real fulfillment comes when we align who we are with what we do." Jack nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had taken. He wasn't just changing his actions. He was transforming the way he viewed the world. That evening, as Jack walked back to his penthouse, he reflected on everything he had learned. His life was no longer defined by success or money. It was defined by the relationships he nurtured, the impact he made, and the person he was becoming. He still had much to learn, but for the first time, he was excited about the future. The journey wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. And as he looked ahead, Jack knew that with every step he took, he was becoming the person he had always wanted to be. The transition from his old life to his new one had been a rocky path, but Jack had come to realize that it wasn't about perfection. It was about making the effort to change and choosing to be a better version of himself every single day. He had started his journey with a sense of uncertainty, but now, months later, Jack felt a deep sense of peace in his choices. He was no longer defined by his wealth, his businesses, or his reputation. For the first time in years, Jack felt that he could breathe, that the world was more than just a series of transactions. The phone rang, breaking his quiet reflection. Jack glanced at the screen, recognizing the number. It was from Christina. He smiled as he picked up the phone. "Hey, Christina. How are you?" he greeted warmly. Her voice was calm and familiar as she responded. "I'm doing great, Jack. I wanted to check in. How's everything going with you?" Jack leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the skyline outside. "Things are going really well. I've been spending more time focusing on the things that matter. I've been working on some new projects, volunteering, and, well, taking life a little slower." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Christina spoke, her voice thoughtful. "I'm proud of you, Jack. It's not easy to make these kinds of changes, especially when you've spent so long in a world that demands so much from you." Jack chuckled softly. "I don't know if I would have been able to do it without your help. You've been a big part of this transformation." Christina's voice softened, almost as if she were smiling. "I've just been helping you realize what you already knew. The hard part was always going to be doing it." Jack nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "You're right. I had to make the choice, and I did. But now, I'm looking ahead. I want to build something meaningful, something that will leave a lasting impact." There was a new sense of conviction in his words, one that had been missing in his old life. Christina spoke again, her tone sincere. "I'm glad to hear that. It's exciting to see you so sure of your direction. So what's next for you?" Jack paused, thinking for a moment. "I've been considering a new venture. Something that combines my business experience with my newfound focus on giving back. I want to create a foundation that not only helps people, but also empowers them to create change in their own lives." He leaned forward, his excitement building as he spoke. "I've spent so many years accumulating wealth, but now I want to use that wealth to make a real difference. Not just in terms of charity, but in creating systems that help people lift themselves up." Christina's voice was filled with enthusiasm. "That sounds incredible, Jack. It's the perfect way to combine your skills and your new perspective. I think it's exactly what the world needs right now." Jack felt a spark of hope. He had spent so long focused on the material aspects of life, but now he saw that true success wasn't about what you had, it was about what you gave. He wasn't just talking about money, either. He was talking about time, effort, and love. For the first time, Jack felt that he was ready to give all of himself to something bigger than himself. As the conversation continued, Jack realized that he had found his calling. It wasn't just in the business world, it was in the lives of the people he could touch, the positive change he could help create. When they ended the call, Jack felt energized, as if the weight of his past had finally been lifted. The vision he had for his future was no longer just a dream. It was a reality he was ready to begin building. The next few days were filled with research and planning as Jack worked tirelessly on his new project. He reached out to trusted colleagues who shared his values, and they quickly formed a team dedicated to making this vision a reality. The foundation would focus on education, sustainability, and providing resources to communities in need. Jack knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. As the weeks passed, Jack felt himself becoming more deeply involved in the work of the foundation. He spent time in local communities, speaking with individuals who were directly affected by the issues he was trying to address. The stories they shared with him were powerful, and they only strengthened his resolve. This was the kind of work that truly mattered. One afternoon, as Jack sat in his office, reviewing the latest report on the foundation's progress, he received a message from Christina. "I've been thinking about you again," it read. "How are you doing with everything? I'm proud of how far you've come." Jack smiled as he typed his response. "Thank you, Christina. I'm doing better than ever. This is the most fulfilling work I've ever done." He paused before adding, "You've helped me see that the real impact isn't in what I achieve for myself, but what I can do for others." He hit send and leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of his journey. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, Jack felt truly connected to his purpose. He was no longer chasing an elusive idea of success. He had found something far more meaningful, the ability to change lives for the better. And that, he knew, was the legacy he was meant to leave. As Jack stood in front of the window in his office, looking out over the vast city that he had once ruled with power and wealth, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. His life had taken a turn that he never imagined possible. The journey of self-discovery, guided by Christina, had not only reshaped his career, but also his entire perspective on life. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing after success. He was living it. He had found fulfillment in helping others, in making a difference that extended beyond his financial empire. Jack's foundation had started to gain traction, reaching more communities and bringing real change. His team was growing, and the projects were flourishing. But despite all the success, something inside Jack still longed for more. He had changed, yes, but now he wanted to help others see that they, too, had the power to transform their own lives. He was no longer just a businessman. He was an advocate, a mentor, a guide for those who wanted to find a better way of living. The phone on his desk buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Christina. "I've been thinking about the impact you're having. How do you feel about everything? Are you finding the balance you were looking for?" Jack smiled as he read her message. She had always been there for him, challenging him to think deeper, to push beyond the boundaries of his old mindset. He quickly typed a response. "I'm more than I ever thought I could be, Christina. I'm making a difference, and it feels right. But I want to do more. I want to teach others that it's not about the money or the status. It's about the heart behind what you do." A few moments later, her reply came through. "That's exactly it. The world needs more people who understand that. Keep going, Jack. You're on the right path." Jack leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of her words settle within him. He had come so far, but there was still so much more to accomplish. His foundation was just the beginning. He wanted to start something bigger, something that could reach beyond the people he directly helped, to those who didn't even know they needed a change. He began to brainstorm new ways to expand his reach, to create opportunities for people to take control of their own lives. He had been given a second chance, and now he was determined to share that with as many people as possible. Jack knew that there would be challenges ahead. There would always be those who doubted his motives, who questioned his intentions. But that no longer bothered him. He had learned that the opinions of others couldn't define his path. The only thing that mattered was the work he was doing, the change he was creating, and the lives he was touching. One evening, as Jack sat in the quiet of his penthouse, reflecting on the past months, he realized something important. The person he was becoming wasn't just someone who gave back. It was someone who inspired others to do the same. He could help people, but the true power lay in teaching them how to help themselves. It was then that he decided to take the next step in his journey. He would begin offering mentorship programs through his foundation, providing the tools and knowledge to people who wanted to create their own change. Jack was no longer just a philanthropist. He was a catalyst for personal transformation. Over the following weeks, Jack's mentorship program gained momentum. More and more people reached out to him, eager to learn how they could change their lives. Jack worked closely with his team to develop a series of workshops designed to help individuals recognize their potential, set goals, and take the necessary steps to achieve them. As the program grew, Jack found himself working directly with individuals from all walks of life, from young entrepreneurs to single parents looking to provide a better future for their children. Each story was unique, but the underlying message was the same. People wanted to take control of their lives, to stop waiting for change to happen and to make it happen themselves. Jack's heart swelled with pride as he watched the program unfold. This was what he had been working for. This was the change he had hoped to bring. But it wasn't just about the individuals he was helping. It was about creating a ripple effect, where one person's transformation inspired others to do the same. It wasn't long before Jack received a message from Christina again. "I've been hearing incredible things about your mentorship program. You've really found your calling, haven't you?" Jack's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he typed his reply. "I think I've finally found my purpose. I'm not just changing my own life anymore. I'm changing the lives of others." His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his assistant. "Mr. Anderson, We've had a significant increase in donations this week. The foundation is growing faster than we expected. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had always known that giving back would have a profound impact, but he hadn't anticipated this level of success. He stood up from his desk, looking out at the city below. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly fulfilled. It wasn't the wealth, the power, or the empire he had once built that gave him this feeling. It was the difference he was making in the world. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the skyline, Jack knew that he was on the right path. There would always be challenges, but with each obstacle, he was growing stronger. And with each person he helped, he was leaving a legacy that would last far beyond his business empire. Months had passed since Jack had taken the first step in his transformation, and each day, he felt more grounded in the new life he was building. His foundation had grown, his mentorship programs were thriving, and he had found fulfillment in a way he had never imagined. But even with all of the progress, Jack knew that there was still work to be done. He wasn't finished. The more he helped others, the more. He understood that his journey wasn't just about giving back. It was about healing the parts of himself that had been hidden for so long. One afternoon, Jack was sitting at his desk when his assistant, Maria, knocked on the door. "Mr. Anderson, we have a visitor," she said, her voice polite, but with a hint of urgency. Jack looked up, slightly puzzled. He didn't have any appointment scheduled for the day. "Who is it?" he asked. "It's Christina," Maria replied. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Christina? He hadn't seen her in person in weeks. They had kept in touch over the phone and through messages, but she had been busy with her own projects, and Jack had been caught up with the foundation. "Send her in," Jack said, standing up from his chair. When Christina entered the room, Jack couldn't help but smile. She looked as calm and composed as always, but there was something in her eyes, something deeper, something he couldn't quite place. "Christina," he greeted her warmly, stepping forward to give her a hug. "It's good to see you. How are you?" She returned the hug and smiled softly. "I'm doing well. I wanted to talk to you about something." Jack gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. "Please sit down. What's on your mind?" Christina took a seat, her expression serious but kind. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've been doing with the foundation," she began. "I think it's amazing what you've accomplished. But I also think there's something missing. You've been helping others, which is incredible, but I feel like you haven't fully given yourself the space to heal. You've been so focused on changing the world, but I think it's time to focus on yourself for a while." Jack was taken aback by her words. He hadn't expected her to say that, but as soon as she did, he realized she was right. He had been so consumed by the mission to help others that he had neglected the parts of himself that still needed attention. He had built a successful foundation, created life-changing programs, but he hadn't truly healed from the years of living with a mindset that only valued money and power. "I don't know what you mean," Jack said softly, leaning back in his chair. "I've been doing this work because it feels right. It gives me purpose." Christina nodded. "I know it does. But helping others is only part of the equation. You can't pour from an empty cup, Jack. If you don't take the time to heal, to address the wounds you've carried for so long, you'll burn out. You'll lose yourself again." Jack sat in silence, her words sinking in. He had been so focused on proving to the world that he had changed that he hadn't given himself the space to confront his own past. His desire for validation, the need to feel worthy through achievements. These were the things that had driven him for so long. He had taken steps to change his life, but he had never truly addressed the root of his struggles. "I've been running from my past," Jack admitted, his voice quiet. "I've been so afraid of confronting the person I was, that I didn't realize I was still carrying that person with me." Christina's gaze softened, and she reached across the table to place a hand on his. "It's okay, Jack. You don't have to carry that weight anymore. You've already done the hardest part. You've acknowledged that there's more to life than success. Now, it's time to let go of the rest, to forgive yourself and to heal." Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "How do I even begin?" he asked, his voice tinged with vulnerability. Christina smiled gently. "It's a process, Jack. It's about giving yourself permission to feel, to grieve the parts of yourself you've neglected. It's about being kind to yourself, the same way you've been kind to others. You can't rush it. Just take it one step at a time." Jack nodded slowly, her words resonating deeply within him. He had spent so many years running from the truth, from the person he used to be, But now he saw that healing was about accepting himself, flaws, mistakes, and all. He had worked so hard to rebuild his empire, but it was time to rebuild himself. As he and Christina continued talking, Jack felt a weight begin to lift from his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly seen and understood. He had been trying to prove something to the world, but now, it was time to prove something to himself. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was the next step in his evolution. As Christina left his office that day, Jack knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. He had spent so much of his life focused on external success, but now, he was ready to focus on the internal work, the healing that would allow him to truly live with purpose. And as he looked out over the city from his office window, Jack felt a sense of peace. He was no longer defined by the man he had been. He was becoming someone new, someone who would continue to change the world, but this time, from a place of self-awareness, compassion, and true inner strength. Jack sat in his office, staring at the email in front of him. The past few months had been transformative, and his foundation was thriving, but he knew that the journey wasn't over. There was still so much to do. He had come to realize that making a difference in the world meant continuously evolving, continuously learning. The pressure to succeed had always driven him, but now, it was the desire to help, to inspire, that pushed him forward. He had taken the time to heal, to confront his past, and now he was ready to give more of himself to the world. Yet, there was still one part of his life that remained in limbo. Despite all the changes he had made, there was still an ache in his heart. He had rebuilt his business, his foundation, and his sense of purpose, but there was something more he had yet to address. He hadn't yet come to terms with his relationships. He knew that the way he had lived his life before had caused damage. His connections with people had always been transactional, built around his success and his wealth. But now he was beginning to understand that real connections required vulnerability, trust, and commitment. It was time to face the people he had hurt. Jack reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. As the phone rang, his heart raced. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew it was a necessary step. When the call was answered, Jack took a deep breath. "Mom, it's Jack." There was a pause on the other end, a slight hesitation before her voice came through, soft but warm. "Jack, it's been a long time." Hearing her voice brought a wave of emotion he hadn't anticipated. It had been years since he had truly connected with his mother. He had been so wrapped up in his own life that he had pushed away the people who cared for him the most. "I know," Jack replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been busy, and I've made a lot of mistakes. But I'm trying to do better now. I want to fix things, Mom. I want to rebuild our relationship." There was a long silence before his mother spoke again. "I've always wanted you to be happy, Jack. You've had so much potential, but you've never really let anyone in. It's good to hear that you want to make things right." Jack's heart swelled with a mixture of guilt and relief. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could change how he approached the future. "I've been working on myself, Mom. I've been focusing on helping others and being a better person, but I know that's not enough. I need to be a better son, a better friend. I need to make amends where I can." His mother's voice softened. "It's never too late, Jack. We can always change. Just take the first step, and the rest will follow." Jack's eyes misted over as he absorbed her words. It wasn't going to be easy, and he knew that rebuilding trust would take time. But for the first time in years, he felt like he had the right tools to do so. "I want to meet with you," Jack said quietly. "To talk. To start over." His mother paused, a small sigh escaping her lips. "I'd like that, Jack. I'd like that very much." The call ended soon after, and Jack sat back in his chair, letting the weight of the conversation settle over him. He had taken the first step toward healing not just his life, but his relationships. He was finally ready to rebuild the bridges he had burned in his pursuit of success. The next few days were filled with meetings and preparations for the upcoming conversation with his mother. Jack had been focused on his career and his foundation for so long that he had neglected the very people who had always been there for him. It was time to change that. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was a step he had to take. When the day arrived, Jack stood in front of his mirror, his heart racing with anticipation. He had made so many mistakes, but this was his chance to make things right. As he walked into the restaurant where they had agreed to meet, he felt a sense of nervous excitement. His mother was already there, sitting at a table by the window. She looked up as he approached, and for the first time in years, Jack saw the warmth in her eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said softly as he sat down across from her. "Hi, Jack," she replied, her voice gentle. There was a moment of silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was more like an unspoken understanding that the distance between them had been long, but it didn't have to remain that way. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm sorry for everything, Mom. For all the times I ignored you, for all the times I was too focused on my own success to realize what I was missing. I've been so caught up in the wrong things that I forgot what truly matters. And you matter, Mom. You always have." Tears welled up in his mother's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I've always loved you, Jack. No matter what. You just had to find your way. I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Jack squeezed her hand, feeling the deep connection between them. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it was a start. They had both taken a step toward healing, and that was all that mattered. As they spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and reconnecting, Jack realized that the most important relationship in his life wasn't the one he had with his wealth or his empire. It was the relationship he had with the people he loved. And that, he knew, was the true foundation of happiness. Jack had finally taken the first step in mending the most important relationship in his life, the one with his mother. It had been a long time coming, but sitting across from her in that quiet restaurant, with the soft hum of conversation around them, he felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. The walls he had built to protect himself were crumbling, and he could feel the openness and honesty flooding back into his life. He had been so focused on success, on power, on achieving more, that he had forgotten the value of simply being present with the people who mattered. As the weeks passed, Jack and his mother spent more time together. They didn't talk about his past mistakes or the years they had lost. Instead, they focused on what they could rebuild. Their connection, once strained, began to heal, and Jack realized that this was just the beginning. For the first time, he was truly seeing the importance of relationships and personal growth, something he had neglected for so long. In the meantime, his work at the foundation continued to grow. The mentorship programs were expanding, and Jack was more committed than ever to helping others create the same kind of transformation that he had experienced. But something inside him kept urging him to go further, to reach even more people. He had already helped countless individuals through his foundation, but he knew that he couldn't stop there. Jack's heart was full of purpose, and he had finally come to understand that the impact he wanted to have on the world didn't come from what he could accumulate. It came from the lives he could touch and the legacy he could leave. One evening, Jack sat at his desk, looking out at the city skyline, the lights twinkling like 1,000 possibilities. His phone buzzed with a message from Christina. "I've been hearing incredible things about your work. It's truly inspiring to see how far you've come. You've created something amazing." He smiled as he read her words, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her role in his life. Her support had been unwavering, and it had helped him to see the power in making a difference. But as Jack read the message, something clicked in his mind. He had made a decision. It was time to expand his efforts even further, to create something that could empower others in a way that was sustainable and impactful. Jack knew that there was a way to teach people to take control of their own lives, to give them the tools and confidence to build their own future. With Christina's guidance, Jack began to shape a new idea, a new initiative that would provide education, mentorship, and financial support to young entrepreneurs who were struggling to get started. He wanted to offer them the resources they needed to succeed, just as he had been given the opportunity to do so. The idea took shape over the next several months, and Jack began to pour his energy into it, finding new ways to collaborate with partners and organizations that could provide the support and infrastructure needed to make the initiative a success. It wasn't just about giving money. It was about creating opportunities for people to help themselves, to learn how to navigate the business world and develop the skills necessary for long-term success. As Jack worked on this new project, he realized that it was the perfect complement to his foundation's existing efforts. This new initiative would give individuals the tools to create their own businesses, to find financial independence, and to build a future that was rooted in purpose and integrity. It wasn't about quick fixes or band-aid solutions. It was about creating lasting change. As the program launched and began to gain traction, Jack couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. Just a few years ago, he would have never imagined that he would be here, working to give back in such a meaningful way. The old Jack, the one driven by ambition and ego, had slowly faded away, replaced by someone who cared more about impact than wealth. And as he looked around at the people whose lives were being changed by his efforts, Jack realized that he had found the true meaning of success. It wasn't about how much he had. It was about how much he could give. The days of proving himself were behind him. The focus was no longer on what he could accumulate or what he could achieve. The focus was on creating a life that mattered, not just for himself, but for others. The phone buzzed again, pulling Jack from his thoughts. This time, it was a call from his mother. "Jack." Her voice came through, warm and familiar. "I'm so proud of you. I can see the difference you're making, not just in your work, but in who you are. You're becoming the man I always knew you could be." Jack's eyes filled with tears as he listened to his mother's words. The pride in her voice was all he had ever wanted. But now, he knew that pride wasn't just for his achievements. It was for the person he had become. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without your support." As the conversation ended, Jack sat back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He knew that the work was far from finished. But for the first time in his life, he felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. His foundation, his projects, his relationships, they were all a reflection of the new life he had built. And Jack knew that, moving forward, he was going to continue making a difference in ways that truly mattered. As the years passed, Jack's transformation became more evident, not just to the world, but to himself. The foundation he had started grew beyond what he had ever imagined. What started as an idea to help individuals had expanded into a movement, empowering entire communities to find their own path to success. People came to him not just for financial support, but for guidance, mentorship, and a chance to see beyond their current circumstances. Jack had become more than a philanthropist. He had become a symbol of change, a living testament to the power of reinvention. His life was no longer centered around material success or personal achievement. Instead, it was about lifting others, creating a legacy that could outlast him. Jack had learned that the true measure of success was not what you accumulated, but what you gave away and the impact you had on those around you. One afternoon, as he sat in his office overlooking the city, Jack reflected on the journey that had led him here. The skyscrapers stretched before him, a physical reminder of the empire he had built, but now, it was the work he did outside of these walls that brought him the most joy. His phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was a text from Christina, as it often was. "How's everything going? I heard the latest project is making huge waves." Jack smiled, typing back quickly. "It's going better than I could have ever hoped. I've never been more content. This is what I was meant to do." The message was short, but it conveyed all the emotion Jack felt. He had found his true calling, one that wasn't about climbing to the top or outdoing others, but about using his position to lift others as they climbed. Christina's reply came moments later. "I'm so proud of you, Jack. You've come a long way. Keep pushing the boundaries." Jack's heart swelled with gratitude. Christina had always been his rock, the person who had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. She had been the one to show him that change was possible, that it wasn't too late to live a life of meaning. The phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a call from his mother. "Jack, I wanted to let you know how proud I am of you. I see the difference you're making, not just in the world, but in yourself." Jack felt his eyes well with tears. It had been a long journey to earn her forgiveness, but now, he was finally living a life she could be proud of. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "That means everything to me." After the call, Jack leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of her words sink in. His life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He had healed old wounds, built something meaningful, and learned to live with purpose. The road wasn't always easy, but it had been worth every step. As Jack looked out over the city, he knew there was still much to do. The foundation had reached more people than he ever thought possible, but there were still countless individuals waiting for a chance. He had learned that change didn't happen overnight, but it was a ripple that spread, a single act of kindness or opportunity that could shift someone's life. Jack had become the person who made that ripple. In the months that followed, Jack's efforts grew even more far-reaching. He began speaking at conferences, sharing his story of transformation, encouraging others to take their own steps toward change. He spoke about the power of vulnerability, the importance of self-compassion, and the need to prioritize people over profits. The more Jack shared his story, the more people came to him, not just for financial aid but for mentorship, for guidance in living a more purposeful life. One day, as Jack prepared to speak at a major event, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought about the man he had been, the businessman who thought success was measured by his wealth and power, and the man he was now. The difference was profound. He had become someone who valued relationships, kindness, and the true meaning of success. The conference hall buzzed with energy as Jack took the stage, ready to speak to an audience eager to hear his story. As he looked out over the crowd, he felt a surge of gratitude. This was why he had made the changes he had. To inspire others, to show them that transformation was possible. When I started this journey, Jack began, his voice steady and confident. I thought success was about what I could achieve. I thought it was about how much I had. But I was wrong. True success is about what you give. It's about making a difference, not just in your own life, but in the lives of others. We all have the power to change, to transform, and to make the world a better place, one step at a time. As the crowd applauded, Jack smiled to himself. He had come full circle. He had gone from a man who measured his worth in dollars to a man who measured it in lives changed. And that was the greatest success of all. The journey wasn't over, but Jack knew that he had found his purpose. And as long as he had breath in his lungs, he would continue to live that purpose every day.